I
No,
pushed the live button, so you never know when that sentence is going to get picked
he's
up.
gonna try.
I don't care.
Oh,
Welcome to the backpack show. We'll
you
get
do
them when
too
we get
care.
them.
I care
I
deeply.
do care. I'm frustrated, but I'm smiling.
So
What?
I'm excited because normally that we usually have alchemy between two totally unrelated guests. This time we got Tim Kitzrow. He's this really iconic voice. If you've ever played NBA Jam, he's the one that'll be like ugly shot and like kind of stuff. Mr. Boom Shakalaka. I love him. So he's part of what made that game so much fun to play, even if you suck at basketball like I do. So got Tim first to agree to come. Then he's like, hey, I don't know if you want to talk to Josh, who made the Insert Coin documentary that includes NBA Jam and Mortal Kombat. And I was like, yes, I would very much like that. So he hooks that up. And then we have a surprise guest because he actually had in the wings, number 3, the guy who wrote the book about NBA Jam. And I was like, yes, please. We would very much like to speak with Rayan Ali as well.
So this is,
So
I'm gonna. Sometimes the show, you're like, oh, I'm not sure about that first guest. Maybe the other one will talk about something I'm into. If you don't at all like video games, or if you don't at all want to understand kind of like how the business of all this works and how the excitement of it all works, you got to go find something else to do.
no, stay anyway because there's human drama in it as well. So I watched the screener. Yes, I watched the screener for Insert Coin and seeing kind of it's not just about the things that they do, it's how they manage to get them done and overcome, prejudices or ideas they had to get past kind of the status quo to innovation.
And we'll find out how Josh Tsui is the only Asian person in all of video gaming. I think that's an important part of the show too.
I don't think that's true anymore. I don't feel like no.
There's only one Asian. That's it. Backpack Show. So I went to click the start of the show and I looked at what you had added to the video clip section and I got completely lost. There's like 5 little graphics that look exactly the same now.
Whoops.
But I get it. It's important. It's just so funny because we're setting up for tomorrow.
Your parents are here. Yes, I should have warned you about that. I have a tendency to do things and not mention them. So,
So,
sorry.
Because my parents are here, this is kind of a fun framing element too. And we can talk about, this is all your brainchild. You wanted to make this all happen. My parents, we started buying video game platforms way back in the way. The first one I seem to remember was called Studio 2 or something like that. And it basically had bowling and a car racing game. It was like right after Pong and all that. But my parents bought like the B system after that. Instead of buying Atari, we had Odyssey.
You had like a beta.
We had I was like the beta kid on the street, but we had the Odyssey. So we didn't get Pac-Man. We had Casey's Crazy Chase. And all of the gaming, excitement I had, like I played in television, like we talked to Tommy Tallarico. I played in television in Montreal at a cousin's house and played baseball endlessly with my dad, just learning how to steal bases. So he couldn't, the score was like 106-8 or something once I figured out how to steal bases. But video game culture, quarter culture, were you a put the quarter on the centipede machine kind of person back in the way old days? Carrie? Are you frozen? Am I frozen? We had a technical glitch, maybe? Well, that hasn't happened in a minute.
No, we have a storm here. Sorry, I'm in Nashville and there's like wind and rain and all kinds of bad things happening.
We haven't had that in a heartbeat.
I didn't get to mention it because other people were having issues. Well, I could tell you that my husband, Dan, funded the crowdfunding campaign to get Insert Coin, the documentary, going like 5 years ago and was so ridiculously excited when the movie was announced that it's launching. And I got to see it. I got a screener to see it this weekend. We all watched it together. My 14-year-old, my 12-year-old, my husband and I. So it's
so fun.
Yes, far-flung appeal.
So Josh Tsui made this documentary called Insert Coin about the crazy times at Midway and some of the stuff going on there, about NBA Jam, about Mortal Kombat. Also, you would know him from that, and we have a funny comment about that. And Rayan Ali is here, who wrote a book that is ostensibly about NBA Jam, but they were talking for a minute about...
I'm so excited about that. About how different it is from what I thought it was going to be, because my kids read, how people write books based on like Minecraft.
Sure.
Yeah. And they're like they're like stories set in Minecraft, and they're usually like fanfic. And I was like, oh no, what's this book? It's fantastic.
It's got so much cover. It's basically the book version of Insert Coin in some ways. So
Mhm.
let's grab the boys. Let's get them in.
Okay.
Let's make something
Let me
happen.
get this button off.
You hit your button and I'll hit my button.
Okay.
Ready to go. Hey Josh, hey Ryan.
Hey everyone, how are you?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
It's actually really stormy and windy here. But I'm so thrilled to have you both with us today. We're working on Tim, so I'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, Carrie might have to go backstage for that. So
I might have to.
Just FYI. So I don't even know what question I want to ask first. I mean, well, chicken and egg. Which came first? Did the book come first? Did the documentary come first? Did they work, side by side? How's that work out?
Man, from what I remember, and you probably correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I remember, I think the Kickstarter for the documentary might have come first, but who knows, right? And you might have been lurking behind the scenes for all I know. I just have to yeah, exactly. But I started the Kickstarter around 2015. Right? Yeah, I think so. But now you beat me to it because you got your book published before me. So, damn it.
I did. Yes. Yeah. It was 2015. Was it 2015 when you launched the Kickstarter?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then I pitched my book in 2015 too. So it was right around the same time. So I remember backing your project before I officially pitched mine. I think I was working on it. I forget the whole timeline, but I've been following along the whole time. So I'm of course, I guess I'm not a colleague, but I'm a peer of some sorts. We're talking about this, but initially I'm a huge fan of this stuff. And before I was even working on the projects, I absolutely had to see this. So I'm super excited about seeing it. I'm actually going to watch it tonight myself. I'm going to make a whole thing out of it. And I have purposely stayed away from screeners, even though I've been a backer, because I want to see it so bad. I want to see it like the real way.
Awesome. Oh, the real way. Because I thought the fake way. Thanks.
Yeah. No. Okay. The real way is like on the day of, we're going to make a whole thing of it. Maybe I'll
watch party.
Yeah, exactly. It'll just be me, but it'll be a launch party, a party of one.
So what I love about the book actually is that you can get into some things that I imagine you had to say cut out of the documentary for runtime, and so you get kind of it's not a deeper look at it, but some things you get to hear some stories and see some things that you maybe didn't realize had happened from the documentary because just for time you had to take them out. I do have one question about something that's not in the documentary, Josh. No WrestleMania.
Oh, I know. This is one of those things where, in filmmaking, and I think in any creative project, you have to kill your babies. And and that one for myself was particularly painful because that was the first game I ever worked on. When I came into Midway, the NBA Jam team had just finished NBA Jam and they wanted to do a wrestling game. So I got hired for that. And so it was such a great segment. It's going to end up in the Blu-ray as bonus content, so that makes me feel a little better. But yeah,
I had so excited for that it wasn't there, and I was like, because that was everywhere when I was in college. We had an arcade like back in a million years ago, and and that was one of the games you could never get on because somebody was always
that's great. That's great to hear. Yeah, no, it's like to your point about runtime. That was there was so much stuff that ended up getting cut, and because you can't have a documentary be too crazy long, otherwise it ends up being an encyclopedia and not a film to enjoy. So
it's definitely a love story, though. I think you and Rayan both have that in common, that you have the personal connection to these games, into the whole, how they were made, that makes you want to tell that story, and it really comes through.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, definitely.
So I started a sentence before Carrie froze, and then I lost my entire train of thought. No. This is like a while ago. I lost my train of thought, which I was going to say was, I had a lot of consoles growing up, but my roots are all in the actual arcade. So, back in the Pac-Man fever days, and of course this all covers a little after that, but back in the Pac-Man fever days, totally. Well, I was gonna say it wouldn't make any sense, but it's like 3 doors down from the high school in the city where I grew up. So I was raised directly across the street from a high school. So like my windows looked out on the high school. So if you walked down 3 or 4, there was this old shop that had been there forever, and they stuck an arcade there, which was so incongruous. Like it was a residential neighborhood, but the high school was right there. And so I remember putting quarters on machines waiting to play Centipede or whatever. I remember, back when games were the worst. And I always think of that stupid JonTron song about a bird eats camel or whatever, which was, he's making fun of Star Wars video game back when all the pixels, you can't understand it's an AT-AT fighting an X-Wing. you were involved in, and this book and everything is involved in, when graphics got good, when people paid attention, when there was suddenly real art to this, not just people trying to get quarters out of people. It's interesting to talk about that, though, because, you know, coming up in Pac-Man and Centipede, when Mortal Kombat showed up, everyone went, what? You know, and parents were not expecting heads to come off of people. I guess let's start there.
Yeah, let's start there. That's my favorite part.
Yeah, where do we get? I mean, that really is, you know, that really is the story of the 90s. You know, in the 80s, you had games that were a little bit more abstract in nature. In the 90s, technology blew up. You know, so suddenly you can get, you know, videos of actors into a game, and you can start playing with realism and just manipulating things to the point where, for its time, things seemed very realistic. And so, in the case of Midway, I can't speak for all other companies, but in the case of Midway, because of the nature of how the teams were managed, which is basically no management. It was like Lord of the Flies Island. So think about a bunch of, you know, young 20-somethings, mostly male, given to their own devices to make any game that they want. Well, you know, at that age, they're going to want to go do things that inspired them. And for a lot of us, we're inspired by crazy action films of the 80s. You know, so now you get a game like Mortal Kombat where, you know, John Tobias and Ed Boon, they both loved, you know, kung fu movies. They loved Big Trouble in Little China, you know, Enter the Dragon, all these things. They just mashed it up and added realism. And then on top of that, they wanted to put in a lot of humor, which equated to humorous violence. And so that gets mixed in, and that's what you end up with.
That's exactly my sense of humor. I love the cheat codes. So remember when like blood was off and you had to know the code to turn blood on? I was immediately like, I'm going to turn the blood on. And then I learned the code to make, I forget which part this was, but Dick Van Dyke's head would float by for no reason. I was like, I need to do all these things. But I was one of those people that went through the magazines and found all the things that you probably thought no one's ever going to do this. I'm sure immediately somebody figured it out and immediately told all the rest of us, and we all did it.
So Ray, I want to drag Ray on in for a second, which is because, you know, your career before this, I mean, you're a guy who like kind of started out in Dallas and moved your way out to CBus, of all interesting places on the earth. And you've written for all these places, you know, the Atlantic, Wired, Rolling Stone, all these cool places. And, you know, you have credits all over the place. But this book, if you Google this book is pretty much now your beacon.
Right.
This is it. You're done. So
it's
can you
it.
talk,
That's me.
You're done?
for a second. Yeah, well, I mean, like, this is a child
my last
actor.
interview I'm doing. This is my final interview, guys. Yeah,
He's retiring.
It's been a good year.
Child actor, basically. You know, this is it. You're the NBA Jam book guy.
No, this is the book you wanted to write because you love this, I feel like.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit of both, actually. So I had been writing for many years about music and pop culture. I was doing all kinds of cool stuff, lots for all weeklies. So, you know, for free papers, I'd write in, you know, so-and-so bands coming to town, or I do Q&As for any of these sites that you mentioned. But it was really hard trying to find a niche or a place where honestly somebody cared. Like I was really hustling with freelancing. I wrote for like 50 places, but I could never find a niche or where anybody was ever like, oh, I recognize that name, or I'll go back and read something. And then when that opportunity came up in 2015 to like write a whole book, and then Boss Fight Books came along, and when I saw that they had an open call for these pitches about a video game book, I'd never really written about video games before, but I was like, this is the opportunity. I'd actually pitched a couple music books before that both got rejected. So I was like, I want this to be like, this is going to be the thing.
And we need Tim here. Be like, rejected.
Yes. Yeah. Ugly pitch. I don't know.
Ugly shot.
Yeah.
Ugly book pitch.
Ugly book pitch. Bad book pitch. But yeah, so like when there was so much interest, I was like, okay, let's keep going. And then immediately I knew that if I was going to get people's attention for this, I had to like really go above and beyond. So I did like 60 something interviews for the book. I really just went overboard with it. And yeah, now I'm the NBA Jam book guy. Like people call me like, somebody on Twitter said to me, good morning, NBA Jam. And I was like, well, good morning to you too. So thank you for thinking me. It's like, I'm the physical embodiment of NBA Jam. Much worse things to be in this world, much worse things to be. So I'll take it.
I've got to say that this is the perfect time to drag in Tim Kitzrow. Because
good timing.
If you're the man who's the book of it, here's the voice of it. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Hey.
I can't hear you guys. You guys having a party? We're having more technical difficulties here.
Oh no.
Carrie, do you Do you want to try to grab him? Okay.
Well, it looks like I may have to join another day. I've got the professional microphone and everything. Got the earbuds. I downloaded the Firefox, but I'll join you in a minute. Stand by. We're having technical difficulties.
What an absolute professional!
God bless him.
Shit, it's not working, and then he just goes into his pitch. Carrie, I don't know if you could circle with Tim for a second. And Ryan, I want to just follow that hey, you seem like this guy. And now that you're the NBA Jam book guy, like, for bands and all that, it's really interesting because, growing up, Van Halen all the way, then Metallica all the way. Thank God I don't have tattoos. But that's something that, like, so Josh was in it, working on it. And you're like me, you're an outside person who just sort of loved the thing. Of all the video games on the earth, why NBA Jam?
NBA Jam was immediately one of those things where I knew that there's got to be something there. I mean, thinking about how big NBA Jam was in '93, even before I was doing research for the book, just as a fan, I mean, you think like this thing was on top of the world, like this was everywhere. And I mean, this made more money than Jurassic Park. And then lo and behold, when I started working on the book in 2015, there was no new NBA Jam game. I mean, there still is no new NBA Jam game. Last one came out in 2010. So it's very much like there's got to be a story, like that whole period between 93 and 2015, like what happened in there? Like where did all that interest in NBA Jam go? So I knew that like there's got to be some really good stories. Plus, I was familiar with the Midway guys because my very first ever writing gig, long before the music stuff, was working for a Mortal Kombat website. So I was 13. So that was where it started, way back when. Mortal Kombat NetherRealm. It was like one of like the low tier Mortal Kombat websites, but man, we tried. We got a couple cool things over there too. So I knew some of the names, and I had that familiarity to be like, okay, I know what Midway is. Not really sure who Mark Turmel is, but I know who Sal DeVita is, and who this person is, and who that is. So there was some familiarity. Plus, like I was like, everybody likes NBA Jam. Like everybody, like there's just such an excitement when people talk about it that you're like, well, if they like NBA Jam, that must means they have stories attached to NBA Jam or memories of NBA Jam, and that means that I can get some real kind of outlandish people. So, with NBA Jam, the book, I was able to get, Shaq and John Romero, who co-created Doom, and George Clinton and the NBA Jam guys, and John Tobias, co-created Mortal Kombat, et cetera, et cetera. So you're really able to do a lot over there because people have such positive memories and, generally nice things to say. But I knew there's some more meat on the bone past that. You know what I mean? Like you don't reach a huge peak like that without falling, without there's something being like some story being there. So I knew that there was something, like there was going to be something. I didn't really know what it was. I had bits and pieces, but I just had a really good feeling about it,
Well, when you said that, it's really funny because the storytelling versus documenting, I'm going to go to Josh with this in a second, but it's the way you said that is like, we all kind of, if you watch a lot of documentaries, you end up getting in this space where you're kind of expecting that arc. Things are great. Things are great. Things are great. No, they're not, and then never mind. We got back, like that's the arc. It's always the arc. One, I haven't watched Insert Coin. Josh is at the arc. And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, it's definitely the arc. I mean, the 90s was the last gasp of classic arcade games, and classic arcades. And so, literally, with Insert Coin, the story is about at the end of the 80s, very end of the 80s, how a designer named Eugene Jarvis, starts up this game called Narc, and that kind of catapults the company forward well into the 90s, leading up to Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam. And then as technology gets better, you start seeing the arcades fading, and because for a couple of different reasons, but mainly because people found a better way to play games that was going to be more convenient. And in many ways, it's kind of it's kind of like the Blockbuster Netflix story or theaters and cable story. As technology changes, no matter what you do, it's gonna move along, and how you pivot your business is going to really determine if you're going to survive or not. And so that's really the Midway story, but it's also just video games and pop culture in general is stuff that that the film covers.
It's a big thing. So my ex-wife and my son are watching, and my son is a 14-year-old who only likes classic video games, only likes retro stuff. And I'm always on the bleeding edge of, which platform we're going to get and all that. And he's always back a ways. So, even hearing about this, his very first comment was the boom shakalaka.
That's awesome. It's amazing. Yeah. It's funny. My youngest daughter, one day came up and said "Boom Shakalaka" to me. I'm like, where did you hear that? Because at the time, she didn't really know much about the film or what I was doing with it. And she brought it up, and I forgot what it was, but I think she might have heard it on some kids show or some YouTube video. It might have been Roblox for all I know. But it just shows how something so simple has permeated into the culture and has kind of evolved from there.
Oh yeah, the things that we say in all those games have become part of our regular rotation. We'll be like fatality or stuff for no reason. So Tim can hear now if you want to give it a whirl.
Let's try it.
Okay.
Did it work this time, Tim?
He's muted now. Now he's just piling on.
Oh. Yeah, you're muted though.
That's all right. We'll do this.
Can I unmute him?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh my God, you've been attacked. You've been attacked.
There we go.
Oh no, it says I can't unmute him because his mic isn't connected. Oh, Kim.
Oh, Carrie, I'm taking him back out again. Look, now I have my toupee.
Fine.
Josh, I want to double down. I have one more question.
Yeah.
Jesus. She's been fed and everything. Not one more question, but I have a question to follow on that one. There's a bunch of people here who love and live with video games. There's also a bunch of people here who have no idea what we're talking about and are smiling politely. I'm thinking of my friend Debbie, etc. Why do we relate to this? And I mean, I guess Rayan can answer that too. But why is this in our blood? I mean, it was your job. I mean, you were the talent for a lot of this, but you were also creating it all. Why do we relate to this in this way?
I think it's whether it's video games or any other form of entertainment. People like to hear about how their entertainment is made. It's you see people who buy Blu-ray movies and want to get that because they want to see the behind the scenes bonus videos. They want to see how the visual effects for Star Wars were done. Right. And so it's no different with the video game. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure with the documentary was that there was enough information, inside baseball information, for those who are the super fans. But in general, I wanted to be about the creation of entertainment, the business behind it. These are universal truths that people want to search out, and I want to make sure that was always there. So someone like my in-laws can watch it and they get the struggles of how hard it is to make something or how to market it. The business reasons why this game was designed a certain way was because we're trying to get a quarter every 45 seconds to a minute. Anybody can relate to something like that. Right.
Well, and that's that one comment. We're trying to get a quarter, every X amount of minutes. People don't understand that. People don't understand the financial scenario of if you just make it wish fulfillment and they could just be joyous the whole time. That's very different than needing to empty someone's wallet a little bit.
Yeah, and that's the thing. One of the things that a lot of people have mentioned to me was that they were really surprised by how much they learned about the business end, and the games were designed. It's like, hey, you know what? We want to make this enjoyable, but we need to balance it with enjoyment, but with commerce. It's like because if you make the game so hard that they don't want to come back, that becomes an issue. And so it's always a struggle back and forth. And there's a lot of testing with various people and to see what feels right and what doesn't feel right. And I think that's one of those fascinating things that anybody can relate to.
In just the trailer alone, there was one thing I saw that made me think about this in a whole different way, which is that whole sense of just showing up. Like the quote was something like, "I thought there'd be this book," and like, okay, here's the book, page 1. Let's work on this project. It's like, no. I'm curious to know if Rayan felt the way I did. Like, there was like a lot more system to this, or did you know, or like what surprised you in writing NBA Jam, the book?
I thought there would be a little bit more of a system than there was. And I thought that NBA Jam was more planned than it was. And these games were generally more planned than they were, but a lot of the stuff just kind of came along as it came along. Like, for example, I found out that He's on Fire was not part of that initial pitch to the NBA. That was something they came up with when they were at Burger King one day. And that blew my mind. It's like, this is something that's iconic now, and it's just something that, just happens at lunch. But that's how these things happen when it's really good, when it's really organic. It's gonna do that. There were so many little examples. I mean, the crazy dunks in NBA Jam, they were originally more realistic. And then Eugene Jarvis, who Josh was talking about earlier, came into Mark Turmel's office one day, the lead designer of NBA Jam, and saw Mark playing with these dunks on the screen. And he was like, okay, make the people dunk higher. make them 10 feet higher.
Right.
And then Mark's like, yeah, maybe we can do that. And then one thing leads to another, and now that's like absolutely iconic. That's something that's absolutely part of that NBA Jam language. And there's little bits and pieces of things like that. So, I definitely went in thinking that there's a lot more structure to it in terms of like, okay, we did X, Y, and Z. These are all the plans. But then you realize so much of this stuff is just coming up with stuff on the fly or trying to figure out what am I going to do in the situation. Tim wasn't the first choice for an announcer for NBA Jam either. It was John Hay, who was the sound guy on the game. And John worked with Tim. Like he knew him through a music scene, and then he talked to Mark, the lead designer of NBA Jam, and suggested him. And this is somebody who's iconic now, but he almost wasn't part of it. So all these little things, this butterfly effect could have made it a totally different game, and then we might not know NBA Jam to the degree that we do, or even care about it the way that we do now. So it was really interesting learning about how much of this stuff came from creativity and responding to situations as you went along.
Debbie Saviano's here from Women's Leadership Live. She says, I'm fascinated as it's a world that many don't know a whole lot about, but it's also such an incredible industry with a powerful following. One of the things that Rayan mentioned just in passing was the fact that NBA Jam made more money than Jurassic Park, which people don't think about. But I push those numbers all the time. So whenever I talk about video games, I'm laughing because Jonathan Harrison's here, who wrote a great book about the business of video games. You've surely both talked to him on Twitter 1,000 times. Mm-hmm. The numbers, like the box office numbers of video games, dwarf by multiples the box office of movies, and yet we only ever hear about box office of movies in any conversation. I guess I'll make this into a question for Josh. Debbie's here from outside that world. She's asking, why didn't I get into this? Why wasn't it my thing? Or, why don't we understand this world that you just landed in? Like there's never ever been a different world for you. Why not?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that is very different about the video game industry compared to most entertainment industries is that the video game industry really they don't talk about dollar amounts too often. They talk about the number of users, the number of downloads and such. But it's a very secretive industry in many ways, and so you don't hear about how X billions of dollars a game like Fortnite makes. There might be leaks that come out here and there, but there's never official numbers. It's not like the film industry where here's the box office numbers for the weekend. And it's just there's a weird cultural difference. My theory on that is it's partly because video games are, yes, they're entertainment, but it's really software development. And so software development is not a sexy industry, and video games, in general, yeah, it's a fun, sexy industry, but there's that software background to it. So the companies never really fell into that trap of, Mortal Kombat made, or NBA Jam made $1 billion and things like that. It just was never a public thing. So because of that, I think the general public never hears about it. Now, if you're in the industry, what everyone else is making. But yeah, it's I like to think that, we're all down in our hearts, we're all like a bunch of geeks and nerds that want to keep to ourselves, and so the information kind of stays internal.
It's funny how I was just thinking that through that too. I was thinking, because I worked in wireless telecom for a while, and developers are developers. You all have your stacks of Mountain Dew. You all have like, everyone's smelly. Everyone much prefers a dark room to a light room. It's like we're not the best social creatures when we get together. We like the corners. And I was thinking about the fact that there's just so few John Romeros. We had Tommy Tallarico on, who did Video Games Live, who now owns Intellivision, which is ridiculous to imagine. Like he bought Intellivision, so now he's going to launch this new version of that.
Amazing.
And Carrie, I pushed all your buttons while you were talking to Tim. I'm so sorry for you. Carrie wanted this show so badly, so at some point we're gonna have to push Tim to the curb. He's ejected. For every John Romero, for every Tommy Tallarico, there's one joke about engineers, for instance, is never give an engineer a microphone. They will always make it horrible. That's maybe one difference of having you here, especially as a filmmaker and all that, is the fact that you were also the talent. You also could show up at an event. I mean, in this world, Nolan Bushnell shows up somewhere and he gets swarmed, and everyone else is like, why is everybody chasing that poor man? My son and I waited in a good long line for Charles Martinet to get a signature. It's weird, this world, and I want to go back to that again before I go back to Rayan. It's just like what's that part of it like? And you can even frame it around insert coin. What's it like bringing this to more people so that they can have those behind the scenes moments they're probably craving?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, it was really important to really kind of show off in many ways the people that I used to work with, and because they were so influential on my early career in video games. So these are people that they've done interviews here and there with Game Press and things like that. But I one of the joys of making this film is getting them out in the forefront and having them tell their stories to everybody. And I'll tell you, we're not the type of people that are super comfortable being in front of the camera. It's like, I've been able to, be in the games and have my face out there and things like that. But it's not like from me wanting to, to do that. It was all in the service of the games. It's really more of a behind the scenes type of thing. But we tend to be a reserved lot. And I'll tell you, once this film is out and the PR stuff is done, I'm probably going to disappear, because this is like stuff like this is super uncomfortable for people like us. We'd rather just be in the back, just making things, and have a whole marketing department take care of this stuff.
It's an utterly different experience. Rayan, one of the comments that had come in from Dan Gorgon, Carrie's husband, who backed the documentary, and who is a big NBA Jam guy, Sheridan Ausler, I don't even know how to say his name.
Yeah,
was my fave Jam character. So why is that a joke? I don't even get the inside. I didn't play the game, so you got to help me out.
Sheridan I believe he was wearing a really good hat in the game. That's what it was. And I think he was a midway tester back in the day. Was it a tester, Josh, or was he something?
No, he was an engineer. He was an engineer. That's what he was. Extremely talented engineer. And that department had their hands in every game that was made.
Yeah. And I think it was a distinctive hat, or did he have glasses too? He had glasses and a hat. Something
he had a bowler. I mean, we get into that in the film. But he shows up with a bowler, and next thing you know, he ends up as the most popular character in the game.
Yeah, and I mean, especially when you play NBA Jam, you're just like, what kind of weird Mad Libs person can I play as? Like, a guy with a bowler hat and glasses, or in the later games, Bill Clinton, or Sonic Youth were in one of the later NBA Jam games, which I did not know, on one of the home conversions. You've got dinosaurs that were cut from games. You've got Prince Charles in there, and all kinds of different people. So I think, that's part of the excitement of NBA Jam too in these games. It's like in Mortal Kombat. It's like, what's going to be in there? Like, have you seen the guy in the bowler hat with the glasses? Like, this is, and this adds to that kind of, the 90s style viral discussions of stuff like this. Is like, I saw this thing. Is it real?
So this brings us back around, though, because Debbie had asked another question. She's like, we're seeing more and more things like commercials in the industry with avatars. The whole thing of William Gibson's book Adoru, where a guy, one of the main characters marries a virtual person like Hatsune Miku, is becoming more and more real in like queerly odd ways. The fact that Albert Finney's Looker movie from the 80s, where they digitize a bunch of actors and then kill the originals because it's just so much easier to work with the Sims. Her question is, do you think that's a result of the gaming industry? Did we bring that forward? Is that what happened?
I mean, I'll speak to this part. Is that one for me? I can answer. I'll answer from the game development perspective. Is that it's already happening. I mean, a lot of the technology that video games use now have been unleashed in other industries. And so you have these game engines that are getting incredibly powerful and requires no rendering time. And so you can have 3-dimensional, digital characters all reacting in real time with incredibly advanced AI. You have environments that look completely photorealistic. And that used to only be in video games. Now it's a movie. You watch something like The Mandalorian. All those backdrops in Mandalorian is using a game engine, and they can move the camera around and it looks completely 3-dimensional. In Japan, they're already doing influencers who are purely digital out there, and it just keeps getting better and better. One of the stories that I think directly relates to your question here is when they did the Benjamin Button movie with Brad Pitt. They completely digitized Brad Pitt. They have so much digital data on Brad Pitt that they can make an entire movie without him already. They just I'm sure they haven't done it. It's because for royalty reasons and such. But it's already happening, and people don't even know that it's going on, and it's going to become more and more prevalent, and people will have no idea that it's already that's already going on in their entertainment.
It's kind of nuts, really. Carrie, welcome back. I'm sorry that we worked so hard to try to get Tim Kitzrow into this, but did not happen.
He's gonna come back next week.
Oh, yeah, we'll just get him another time. So Jeremy points out the Unity engine. I was thinking of the Unity engine, the Unreal Engine.
Yep.
There's some of these incredible, and nobody knows these names, but nerdy game idiots. So, but that's kind of different than how things were made. One question more for Rayan, and then Dan asked a question that I want to point out, which was, I guess this is Josh can answer this one kind of quick, which is, Dan said, I really enjoyed the doc, but there wasn't a whole, sorry, Carrie, you're back. I don't know. I forgot. But there's not why not so much the wrestling game? Is it a trademark issue perhaps? And you had an answer.
Oh yeah, I'll have a quick answer for that. No, it wasn't a trademark issue. It was really a runtime issue. And as you've seen in the film, there's an example of film editing becoming really hard to do. You have to make these decisions. But the main thing was that there was a WWF story, and then right after that was a Revolution X story. And what ended up happening is in the long cut of the film, in many ways, they were the same story. It was basically at that point, Midway became so huge that people like the WWF or Aerosmith wanted to work with us. And so it's kind of like this whole story of here's all these superstars coming in to make this game, and and they wanted to be there. And so ultimately, when I had to cut the film down, it was like Sophie's Choice. I had to choose one of the two, and so WWF ended up getting cut. But I mentioned earlier, it'll end up in the bonus segments on Blu-ray.
Perfect. I have to do some sponsor stuff because I just didn't. And Carrie, we'll whip through it because I just feel so bad that you had to eat so much of this episode. I'm so sorry. This was your show.
Oh, stop it.
All right. Look, we're sponsored by StreamYard. You can make your own show like this. You can interview people who can or can't get onto the technology.
Normally, it works perfectly.
like a dream, unless you're Tim.
2 interviews a day for months, and it worked perfectly. We'll figure it out.
Poor Tim. I'm sorry, buddy. See Brogan.me/StreamYard. Make your own show. Authors. I just wrote so much about this.
Authors like Rayan Ali.
That's right. If you want a really nice, easy book publishing site for yourself that you can promote your book in all the different ways you want to, including building a shop there, building a merch thing, a blog, all that social stuff, you can do it the hard way, or you can just get to pub-site.com and make it really fast and easy. Oh, so easy, so inexpensive.
You need a home base so people know where to find you, know your appearances, know where to buy your book.
Yeah, when I Googled a book author today, it was really weird how most of it was on all these other people's websites, but no site for him. So pub-site.com, it is $19.99 a month. If you don't even want to make the site and you've got a little extra scratch laying around, it doesn't cost a typical $2,000 to $6,000 to get this made. It's $4.99 for them to make it for you. That's ridiculous.
Ridiculously easy. It's totally customizable. Authors, go get yourself a site.
pub-site.com also sponsors the person of the day. Which this is going to be tricky to pick today.
I don't know how you pick. Did you get to the question? And I apologize if I missed it. I was on the phone. There was a question about the experience people viewing or playing console games. Here we go. Do you feel bad that millennials and Gen Z are stuck at home playing video games and don't get to go to the mall?
Boy, that's a weird one. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if in the 80s me hanging at the mall all the time was necessarily a good thing or not, but it definitely was my childhood. I mean, speaking, from my point of view, I think having one less communal place for teenagers and kids is kind of bad, so whether it's an arcade or whatever, I just think that, there's huge value in going someplace and meeting up with friends, and to just hang out. And for me, that was the arcade. I was a crazy arcade rat. It's ridiculous how much time I spent in an arcade. And so because of that, I had a lot. I would play games against strangers. There'd be trash talking and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it was like sports. If I lost, we all high-fived each other. I understood why I lost. And you make friends that way. So it is kind of a bummer, but with that said, I don't want to sound like an old man saying, "Oh, it's so much better back in my day." Yeah, get off my lawn. So, but it's I think people are finding different ways to have that communal experience. Whether it's whether it's playing online or there's things like there's like gaming houses that are popping up, and there are for older people, I guess there are barcades that are out there. So there are
For older people.
Barcades for like 21 plus.
Well, we take one just opened in Nashville, and I was like, really, Nashville right now? But anyway, but we take my kids to these places that they set all the games to free play, and they just go around playing all the games. And so they don't have it's not the same by any stretch of the imagination. There's no quarters lined up, none of that, but they can see the appeal, I think, of what we used to do.
We had one north of Boston that just closed because only Harold and myself would go to it. It was just the three of us in there all the time, and like nobody else would go. And there's only so many like $16 tater tots you could buy to try to support a business.
I know.
Rayan, we skimmed on this twice now, and it's basically love of the band versus love of games like this. And I want to talk about that because those are two things you've written about extensively. But who are these people? What are these people? And what makes them feel this way? And what drives your writing drive for this? Because we're talking so much about the fandom kind of feeling about it, but how do you pull stories out of that?
The big thing is just getting them to talk comfortably about what they did in a certain circumstance. And I was thinking about, you had a really good question for Josh earlier about making the film. And it made me think about how in some ways I have a lot easier than Josh, because Josh has to go and he has to find footage to go with something, or he has to find an image, or he has to, do some kind of visual trick to capture something. Whereas, if somebody says to me, the floor was carpeted and the walls were maroon or something like that, I'm like, oh, I can write down the floors were carpeted and the walls were maroon, and so something like that really, really helped with the process of the book, being able to talk to people, kind of parse things, and, in talking to people, really getting them to reveal themselves, you kind of just go bit by bit, try to figure out, what was your role in a certain thing. And, people, especially people who have worked on something, they always love to talk about it. And even game developers who might not have had the opportunity to be in front of a microphone the same way or have their story captured, they all have amazing stories too. And that was one of the really fun things about, talking to game developers, or in this case, this very specific group of game developers versus musicians. These musicians, they go on press tours. They do these phoners all the time. This is something that's just wrote for them. And they probably they've received every kind of main question you can think of. Whereas when you're going over here and talking to a designer, like I talked to this real fascinating designer named Sean Liptak, who was a programmer on NBA Jam. This is somebody who was vital to NBA Jam and I believe he worked on the physics of the game. He worked on scaling and some other things. Somebody who's really pivotal under the hood, but nobody had really captured his story before or even really heard what he had to say about certain things. So being able to give him that platform for that means that you're going to get fresh information. And, and even if you're not going to get 100% fresh information, if it's somebody that's been interviewed a few times, you can go in with different angles. So in some ways, it was a lot easier to work on that versus trying to figure out, like, how am I going to talk about, an indie rock band that's coming through our town that's already done like 5 interviews, or they've already released their best album in the past. That's one of the real fun things about doing this, is going through and parsing that and saying, where were you when this happened? And plus, in the case of writing a book, you can go in and you can focus on those little minute details, and then have them go in as much granular detail as they want, and then just, pick bits and pieces, because I can just chop it up. I can edit it the way you can edit, somebody talking about an experience. So yeah, it was really fulfilling in that way. And that was one of those things that was a lot easier to find, a lot easier to do than I thought probably initially, was getting information out of them, because so many of these great stories are just untold. They're out there. These people are out there. And I was thinking about, 90s game developers. There's so many amazing 90s games that came out that we could really use histories of. There's really things that we could learn about that just aren't out there. And that's what makes these people so special, is that they've got stories that we haven't heard about things we love.
There's so much human drama in it. And being successful, I think, in the coin-operated video game space had a very specific definition, right? It was like how much money each thing brought in, each machine brought in, how many quarters. So that's like when you've succeeded, is when they can't fit any more quarters in the thing and you got to go take them out so more people can play.
Yeah.
Like absolutely. That's a very specific definition of success.
Very specific. And then also thinking about comparing arcade games to how games are now. Like nowadays, let's say if a game is broken, like you can get a day one patch. You can download this huge patch and you can fix this game. Or if it's still broken, you can update it later on. There's always room for improvement. But with these arcade games, unless you're sending out these individual new ROMs for like a big update of the game, like once the game is out there, it's out there. Like, there's no, you can't unring that bell. And that's one of those things too that makes this so much more high stakes, is that you put that game in the arcade, you guys have already probably spent money to, obviously have spent money to put together the whole cabinet, the art, and, obviously program the game, and you're just putting it out there and you're like, okay, what's going to happen? How are people going to react? And there's only so much you can do from there. It's a really high stakes drama when you think about what 90s game developers had to go through.
Jeremy says one of my favorite things is talking to the crew from Ad Sheets. I've done so many great stories that no one ever knows. And Kat says the same thing. Stories we haven't heard about things we love. What's your next love story, Rayon? What's it going to be?
Ooh, I've got a couple of ideas. Part of me really wants to do a novel just because it's something different from having to go in and fact check. The fun part of writing the book is having the conversations, doing all that. The unfun part is going in and doing the transcription. Editing didn't bother me as much as the transcription, because you have to go in and listen to everything. And of course, everybody has a different way of talking. So you've got some long interviews, some short interviews, all this. So part of the appeal of a novel is like, oh, I'll just make it up. I don't have to go and double check anything. I don't have to ask anybody for anything. But I definitely do want to do another video game book. So I've got an idea that I've just recently started working on, and it really has some legs to it, I think. It's still very early in the process, so I won't go too far in saying what it is, because it's not nearly there yet. Not very far.
Now that's all I want to know now.
Yeah,
Cliffhanger.
I definitely want to do more of everything.
Next time though, short links, don't put excerpt in there. Nobody can spell excerpt.
No one knows how to spell excerpt. I should have changed that to one of my links. By the way, Rayan has also interviewed one of our favorites, Mike Tyson.
Yes.
So I'm sure that must have been an experience.
That certainly was. Yeah. Can I tell you a little bit about my Mike Tyson interview?
Yeah.
That was really interesting. So I remember I started I was temping at this digital marketing job. And that was my first day or my second day there. And I was just getting out of freelancing and into this new role. So I went and I was temping in the day, and then I came back at night and I was hanging out at my guest bedroom. And, I've been trying to track down Mike Tyson. It was for a story on Mike Tyson Mysteries, that Adult Swim show that he had. Yeah. And this was back in 2014, I think it was, when I talked to him. I just waiting for him. And then finally, I get the phone call, and I'm pretty sure he was like driving through the desert in Nevada. And when he said, "Hey, Rayon, how you doing?" in that very specific Mike Tyson voice, I was just like, awesome. I was like, oh my God, because you
made it.
Yes, I made it. But no, he was very fascinating. And just to touch on a couple of classic Mike Tysonisms that I got out of it, which was, I think he was describing at one point his wife, kind of acting kind of crazy, kind of insane. And he said she was acting inebriated. And it was just like a classic Mike Tysonism. And I just felt so happy. But I still remember him saying inebriated.
You're like, wait a second. Go back over the.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Also crackpot. Or I'm sorry, you say crackpot. Somebody's crazy there. Crackpot. He says kookpot. And I was like, I am definitely on the phone with the real Mike Tyson over here. So that was
nobody's going to correct him, Rayon.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, it's a really good impersonator, because that kookpot and that inebriated, that really put it over the top for me. It was like, I am definitely talking to Mike Tyson right now.
I was thinking about the fact that we have interviewed people who make Blake J. Harris, who did Console Wars, which is in that same time frame as you, but it was like SNES versus Sega. There's the High Score documentary on Netflix, which I was thinking about, because I was like, did we talk to those guys? We didn't. I just watched it. I just watched the show, but we've talked to a lot of people. This is not a video game show.
It's not.
Oh, I talked to the boys about Ash while you were trying to set up Tim. But the what I was thinking about is, it feels like, number one, this is like the geeks shall inherit the earth. I wrote the wrong book. I wrote the freaks shall inherit the earth, but turns out that it was the geeks. Also, Josh, how many more documentaries about video games can the market bear? This is a genre, the way superhero was a genre.
Yeah, I mean,
the next one, the wrestling one.
Oh my God, yeah, all wrestling.
That's it.
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, in all honesty, there can be countless numbers of them. Because there's so many, like what Rayon was saying. There's so many different angles you can approach this. It's like, you have something like High Score, where it was a docuseries that kind of hit a broad range of topics. For Insert Coin, it was just about Midway and only about the 90s. Williams Bradley Midway was around since the 70s and 60s, and there's with pinball and everything, and then there's stuff in the 2000s. Video games as an industry has been around for over 50 years now. So there's just a ton out there, and it's not just in the United States. Obviously, there's Japanese games, there's European, there's crazy weird Russian games. I mean, it can go on forever. And I think, documenting any type of entertainment, there's a lot to mine. So I think the thing is that, I think it ultimately comes down to is making good documentaries and giving them the very specific personality and not being clinical about it. Anybody can make, not anybody, I should say, but you can make a YouTube video about a game, but it's like, do you go about it?
The names and stuff.
Yeah. Do you go about it? Like, is it a video version of Wikipedia, or is it something that you're going to give an angle, or you're going to give your personality into? And I think, with given the right creators, producers, directors, it can go on endlessly on what kind of video game documentaries can be made.
It's so cool looking at how you actually made the characters move, like how actors had to move like a video game character, sort of. Like, I always thought, oh, it's just because it's like a limitation of the technology. No, you make people walk that way on purpose.
Well, so let's go into that, because Josh, it turns out, may or may not have played at least one character in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, they for Mortal Kombat 2, if you finish the game as Sub-Zero, there's an ending sequence that they show, and Sub-Zero takes his mask off, and they use my face for it. And that's a funny story, because I had just started at Midway at the time, and John Tobias, the co-creator of Mortal Kombat, he kind of just nonchalantly asked to take a picture of my face because he wants to use it in the game somehow. And next thing I know, as one does. But that's that was the personality at Midway, was there was no planning. It was just kind of like, hey, who's around? We need something real quick. So Mortal Kombat 4, they used my face for Liu Kang. Exact same situation. Can I take a quick picture? We're going to put your face on a character. And it's like, yeah, go for it. And it just, back then, as weird as it may sound, because you're talking about early 90s in the Midwest, there was almost no other Asians in the studio. And so anytime they needed an Asian face, it was basically my face that they put in. And I didn't think of it as a big deal at the time. But 20 years later, it's like come back up. Like, it stayed dormant for a long time, and all of a sudden now it's come back up a lot. And
I love that it didn't bother you that you're like the one and only Asian. They would ask you every time.
It's so strange. Like, I just I never really thought about it a whole lot. There is one story that I will have to say that that I realized, oh wait, this there could be some bad repercussions here. There was a game called Revolution X that there was like a shooting gun game with Aerosmith. It's like the most 90s game possible, right? Like, you're like shooting CD-ROMs at people, But there was a part they asked me. They asked to videotape me for a couple of characters. I was like a lab technician, all these other things. But they also asked me to be with the original boss monster for the game. And this just shows you the culture at the time. Was the original ending for the game was that there was this evil Japanese businessman, and you shoot at him, and he eventually turns into this crazy monster that you have to beat at the end of the game. So they asked me, to be this Japanese business person. And so I get dressed up, and I just look like the most stereotypical nerdy Japanese person, and they're shooting me, and it was kind of sinking in on me that, like, if this isn't done well, it's gonna be really bad, not just for me but for everybody involved. And so they did this. It actually got into the game, early on in development stuff they're putting in there, and I had to kind of figure out a way of kind of telling them, like, hey, this might not be a great idea. And so what ended up happening, and I have the card somewhere, what ended up happening was that holiday season, I sent a Christmas card to the main designer of the game, and I said, Merry Christmas, and thank you for shaming my family. And so he got the card, and he got the hint. He's like, oh yeah, maybe we should do that. So they ended up taking the game out, and so that was the one. That was when I realized, like, oh man, I really got to be careful about what I'm doing.
Oh my gosh, I had a whole other sentence I was gonna say, but that one just threw me right off my game. I was amazing.
There's so many stories out there, just like thinking, like, I've never heard that story before. And I spent so many years like trying to learn every little bit and piece. But that's what's so fun about stuff like this is, like, we're going back to the past, but there's new stuff too.
Always
It's endless.
more.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
endless. You know.
Always more.
We have to end the show. I mean,
I
like,
know,
we're
but
supposed to end the show like 15 minutes ago. But
Tell people about the live watch party at the Alamo Draft House, like the virtual watch party, because I want people.
Yeah. On Sunday, if you go to Alamo Draft House on demand site, we're having a watch party. They're calling it the Pleasure Dome Watch Party, and you'll understand what it means when you see the film. But it's going to be fantastic. We're opening with myself and Ernest Cline, who's the author of Ready Player One, Ready Player Two, and Armada. We're going to be live introducing the film, and then during the film itself, I'll be on, with chatting with people however they need to. But even though I kind of want them to pay attention to the film, so if the chatting might, I'm not too fond of that, but that's okay. But then
it's that or they're on their phone, Josh. I mean, pick your poison.
Exactly. That's true. That's true. Yeah. But then at the end of the film, there's going to be a panel with myself, Ernest Cline, Mark Chamel, and who's a creator of NBA Jam, Eugene Jarvis, and there's somebody else I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's going to be great. Like, a lot of the creators and people that are in the film will be on this panel. It's being hosted by Polygon, moderated by Charlie Hall, and that is this Sunday evening. At that point, your Thanksgiving turkey should be digested, so you're going to be fully awake. So please come on in.
That sounds amazing. You should do it. Even if you've already seen it, I would go just to chat with you. Because now that won't be insulting. I'm not paying attention to the movie because I already saw it.
Go for the panel.
Watch the screener.
Ryan, thank you for being here. It's so exciting to have all this going on. I mean, there was so much to cover. We couldn't even barely get in the hour, and we didn't even get to some parts. I mean, the fact that Josh made some of my grandmother's favorite video games, including Tony Hawk Shred, Tony Hawk Ride. We didn't even get to there. Like, there's been a lot of stuff going on. But one thing I always tell you about my grandmother is that she was really good at